America! Trump must go! 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 Trump must go!
Welcome to the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less show. Today is February 20th, 2025. This is our 236th episode. My name is Sansara Taylor, and I'm joined today by Annie Day. Welcome.
Very glad to be here.
So look, we are now, February 20th, 1 month into the Trump MAGA fascist regime. And this makes the mission of this show, the Revolution Nothing Less show, all the more urgent. This is a show about a real revolution, the overthrow of the entire system of capitalism, imperialism, this rotten and illegitimate system that gave birth to this fascist monstrosity, and the replacement of this system with something radically different, far better, emancipating, a new society and system rooted in the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America that Bob Avakian has written. Bob Avakian has forged a whole new framework of human emancipation. He is the author of The New Communism, and you'll be hearing from him later in the show today. And he and we on this show have also been taking up the fight to defeat Trump MAGA fascism, and we'll be bringing you voices from the streets of people rising up, and Bob Avakian speaking to that question as well. So before we dive into that, a few words on what has developed just in this last week.
Bob Avakian opened his New Year's message with this.
Trump 2025 is not just another administration coming into office. This is fascism, the undisguised dictatorship of this system of capitalism imperialism in the world's most powerful capitalist imperialist country.
This is what we're facing. And no matter how it comes to power, fascism is always illegitimate. On February 15th, Trump posted on social media, quote, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." Think about this. Trump is saying that whatever he does, so long as he does it in the name of saving this country, it's legal. This is Trump saying out loud what we have already seen. Trump and his MAGA fascist millions will not abide by elections they lose. They are actively defying court orders, ignoring and seeking to overturn fundamental principles of the U.S. Constitution. And Trump has released from jail his most violent stormtroopers to serve as shock troops to enforce all this. The sheer scope and the pace is part of the method. Here's the fascist Steve Bannon who illustrates this.
All we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with three things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover, but we got to start with muzzle velocity. So it's got to start, it's got to hammer. It's got muzzle velocity.
The fascists are rapidly remaking the whole of American government, shredding what they call the administrative state. Thousands of federal workers have been fired, whole agencies shut down. This has caused programs that deeply impact people's lives to crash to a sudden halt and thrown thousands of people who've devoted their lives to service out of work overnight. They're purging anyone who worked on diversity or even attended a diversity training. The fascists are canceling life-saving research on medicine and the climate. If your study involves the word woman, race, or discrimination among dozens of other words, your funding is cut. The fascists are gutting the Environmental Protection Agency, staffing at national parks, and they want to shut down the entire Department of Education. This is sheer terror, and that is the point. Here's what the fascist theoretician Russell Vought, who now runs the Office of Management and Budget, said about what they want the effect of their actions to be.
We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. We want, when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down so that the EPA can't do all of the rules against our energy industry because they have no bandwidth financially to do so. We want to put them in trauma.
Every institution that might be a block or a speed bump to enacting their fascist moves, silenced, suppressed, terrorized into submission. If these fascists are willing to purge the government of thousands of ordinary workers, if they're removing security protection for generals who have active death threats against them because those generals spoke out against Trump, just think of the implications. Think what they can do to the masses of people. Already, they're starting to pack the torture prison of Guantanamo with immigrants, far away from any legal representation. And if you speak out or resist, the Nazi-saluting billionaire Elon Musk can tweet about you, as he's done with staffers, judges, and journalists, who then face a deluge of internet attacks and the danger of doxing and death threats. Or imagine what it now means that Musk and his openly racist minions have access to everyone's Social Security, their tax records, and the power of the state to launch investigations, freeze your assets, cut off your Social Security, and on and on. Then there's what they're threatening against mass protest. In 2020, in the mass beautiful uprising for Black Lives, Trump was itching to violently assault protesters who were overwhelmingly nonviolent. Can't you just shoot them, he asked. Just shoot them in the legs or something. Now, in 2020, he was stopped by others within the state. But this time, they've cleared away any obstacles to this terror. Again, here's Russell Vought.
When a future president says, what legal authorities do I need to shut down the riots? We want to be able to shut down the riots and not have the legal community or the defense community to come in and say that's an inappropriate use of what you're trying to do.
So far, there's been way too much institutional capitulation. From hospitals canceling medical treatment for trans youth, to arts organizations cutting off funding to art that even just discusses the existence of trans people, and corporations rushing to cancel anything about diversity in hiring. All these people going along with this need to be called out and challenged. Cooperating in advance is collaboration with fascists. It will grease the skids for this fascism, and it will not save you. What is needed urgently to stop this are the masses of people in our millions, filling the streets and throughout every institution to defy this, and not stopping until the demand is met. The Trump fascist regime must go. Given the accelerated pace of this fascism, this needs to become the rallying cry of millions, uniting all who can be united to defeat this fascism before it is fully consolidated and to prevent it from being fully consolidated. In this light, it's really important that there were protests called by many different forces across the country this past Monday, including the organization Refuse Fascism, which has this as its mission. So we want to take a few minutes and show you some of the voices from Refuse Fascism.
So just to introduce ourselves, we are refusefascism.org. This is an organization whose sole mission right now is to get Donald Trump and his whole fascist regime out of the White House. And look around you and look at the diversity of people out here. There are tens of millions of people who don't want to go along with this program. And it is on us, just as Ashley said, it is on us to actually stop this. We gotta get organized, okay? We gotta get organized, and we gotta call on everybody to get out here and to join us. And it's not gonna be your typical activist. It's gonna be your fashion designer, as Ashley was. It's gonna be your nail technician, okay? It's gonna be the people that actually serve you food every day. We gotta call on everybody. We gotta call on everybody and move heaven and earth to do this.
So lately, we've seen the youth step up, from high school students taking matters into their hands to make a statement, walking out to come here to City Hall. I'm making a call out today for college students to make a stance and organize now. We are not in times to be demoralized or to wait for the books to burn or waiting for professors to be fired for teaching the truth. We cannot wait for them to come for our family members. We cannot wait for them to come for our neighbors to be raided in front of us. We cannot allow Guantanamo Bay to be our generation's concentration camp. We cannot sit back as fascism takes over. Our Constitution has time and time again has proven to be conditional and a privilege that can be taken away as seen fit. I am a student trying to organize a walkout, but I don't just call students who pay to be there. I call on professors, our educators. J.D. Vance in his speech referenced Nixon in his speech saying, "The professor is the enemy." We watched this as the Department of Education shut down. Where has our humanity gone when we turn a blind eye to multiple times to Trump's racism and his rant on immigrants, dehumanizing the people I share a face with, the people I share language with, the people I share the spoiled blood with. And you know what? Our blood will ruin the blood of this country through revolution.
Could we actually drive out Trump? Well, that would be an unprecedented thing to do, but this is a time to unprecedented on President's Day and to set some new precedents of driving out a regime. And it has been done in many of your lifetimes, unless there's some little kids here. Because through Arab Spring, people took to the streets all throughout the Middle East and North Africa and drove out regimes. In South Korea, they took to the streets and drove out a regime. But what did they do that we don't do in this country? They got in the streets and they stayed in the streets. They said, "Oh, I have an appointment tomorrow. I guess I can't come out." No, people said, this is the time to sacrifice. We are not bullshitting here. This is not a time for just good feelings. This is a time to experience the joy of serious resistance and sacrifice. If we take to the streets in the millions, then there's all kinds of other people who need to act. Are there any teachers in the house? Are there any doctors in the house? Is there anybody who does research in this institution in the house? You need to not comply. But for you not to comply with Trump and the MAGA fascists requires everyone here to be in the streets. It's not enough to ask somebody else to sacrifice if you're not doing it as well. So I don't want to mince any words about this. This is serious business.
All right, so at the end there, that was Andy Z. He is one of the hosts of this show. He is also a co-initiator, together with myself and others, of refusefascism.org. And like you said, we're going to share some more of the powerful voices of Refuse Fascism speaking out from Monday. Later in the show, this will include Reverend Bowie from Los Angeles. It'll include the immigrant rights activist Araceli. I'll be one of the clips as well, and some other voices.
Yeah, in addition to what you saw last Monday, you also see glimmers of protests that are kind of starting within the institutions themselves. And that shows you some of what needs to break open on a whole other level. High-level prosecutors, including extremely conservative prosecutors within the Justice Department who are refusing to do Trump's corrupt bidding. Or the head of Social Security just publicly resigned because she refused to cooperate with Musk and his Doge team to hand over basically everybody's Social Security information. And you see things like federal workers who've been protesting in D.C. almost every day. And on March 7th, there's a group of scientists who have called for a national protest for science.
This is really important. It needs to spread, and it needs to be infused with the mission and the message of Trump must go. The Trump fascist regime must go. We want to go now to Noche Diaz speaking in Chicago at the protest on Monday. Noche is the national spokesperson for the RevCom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity, and he brought this into these protests.
But we in the RevCom Corps, we're here with a vision of how we want to live. We say that this whole system that spawned Trump MAGA fascism is rotten and illegitimate, and we need and we demand a whole new way to live and a fundamentally different system. And you're going to get it from everybody who wants to disrupt the unity and who wants to attack people who are standing up. Don't talk to the communists. Don't work with revolutionaries and communists. And Bob Avakian, he's a scary cult leader. These are people who don't want to face the reality and the dangers of what we're facing and the stakes for humanity. These are people who are afraid of people learning to look deeper at the causes of all this and lifting their sights to a whole different way the world can be. Because that's who Bob Avakian is. He's someone who stands totally outside of this system and tells the goddamn truth about it. About America was never great, and it is a danger to humanity all around the world, and we do not have to live this way. There's no good reason why we have to face a future of environmental catastrophe where there might not be a planet for future generations. No good reason why there has to be people who are desperate for food or health care. There is no good reason why millions of children die every year from preventable disease and starvation. There is no good reason except that we live under a system of capitalist imperialism, and we need to get rid of that system. So we in the RevCom Corps are working for that revolution, and we challenge you to find out about it too.
All right, so that was Noche Diaz. And as he said very clearly, we RevComs are all the way down with the mission of Refuse Fascism to bring forward the millions necessary to create the conditions where Trump and his whole fascist regime really must go. At the same time, as Noche put forward, we need a revolution and a whole different way we could be living. And we are in a time right now where thousands could be brought into this revolution, given the intensity of what's going on, the major changes and upheaval and the questioning this is spurring. Thousands could be organized into this revolution now. And with thousands organized into revolution, millions can be won to revolution. And with millions won to revolution, there is a real chance for this revolution to win. So we want to call on you to get with the RevCom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity. Get involved, get organized for this revolution.
Yeah, you can sign up at revcom.us/join. So now we want to play an excerpt from the interviews that Sansara recently did with Bob Avakian. We played the full part one of these last week. And this excerpt is particularly urgent and relevant for this moment. Let's watch.
You've been emphasizing in your social media messages, and actually you were just speaking to this, that there really are two countries within this country. It's not one United States of America, but a very sharply divided country, and that the decent country needs to defeat this fascist country. And in your social media, you describe the need to bring forward tens of millions of people in massive opposition and resistance on such a level in this country that we create the kind of profound political crisis where Trump literally cannot govern the country and implement his fascist program. What would that look like? I think people have a very hard time imagining something like that.
Again, it goes back to, your basic understanding and your basic orientation. Is your orientation, well, I guess the people have decided this, so we have to go along with it? Or is it, this is an outrage, and, no matter by what means it came to power, it is totally unacceptable and we will not go along with it. That's sort of a basic bedrock stance. Then, once again, you need science. You need to understand, how can, something like this actually be affected in the way that you were just referring to. Think back to, for example, not that long ago. I know people are conditioned in this country to have short attention spans. It's one of the big problems we have, But think back just a few years, less than 5 years now to 2020, for example. The whole thing that erupted on a massive scale when the cold-blooded, ruthless murder of George Floyd, along with other murders like Breonna Taylor and so on, was just too much. This happens all the time, but this was just too much. And people poured into the streets. And I remember people, ordinary, regular people saying things, and very sincerely, go ahead. I remember seeing, for example, on the RNL show, we had a clip of one woman in one of these massive demonstrations, which in 2020 involved millions and millions of people. I remember this one woman very sincerely saying, go ahead and kill me if that's what it comes to, because black people are dying out here every day being, slaughtered by the police. That kind of outpouring, people, forget things too quickly, including they forget what they actually accomplished, because ultimately that struggle was led into a dead end with demands that had no reality to them, like defund the police, which is never going to happen under this system. But, at its high point, it had such a profound effect that even, I can think, for example, of the, thoroughly reactionary owner of the Dallas Cowboys having to come out and take a knee and pretend to care about these murders of black people over and over again. And other major figures, corporate heads and political figures, all the way up to the very top, had to pretend for the moment to care about this. And these fascists, although they, barked and, raved and ranted, were isolated and put on the defensive politically for this period of time. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about when I say we need a movement of people that is, so powerful and so determined that it actually creates such a major political crisis and impact on the whole society that it shakes up everything even at the top, and Trump is actually unable to govern. And how that actually works out in the ranks of the ruling class and all over is not something that, can be predicted or that I'm attempting to predict right now. But you can see the potential for that to happen. If you look at things like 2020 and the mass outpouring. So people have to have the orientation and the determination and the courage in the face of all this, and in the face of all these ruling class figures capitulating and running to kiss the ring of Trump. People have to say, it's up to us, it's our responsibility. To hell with all these politicians and others who are running to, kiss ass to Trump. It's our responsibility. And it's our mission to take to the streets in massive numbers and keep coming back. See, that's one of the things that is very important. I lived through the 60s and actively took part in the 60s. One of the things that was very important about that, whether it was the struggle of black people or against the Vietnam War or around women, so on and so forth, was that, people didn't just come out in a wave of struggle and then when that receded, that was it. They came back again and again and again. For example, in protesting in massive ways against the Vietnam War, you'd have big protests and the government, our government, quote unquote, the US government, would escalate the war in Vietnam. You'd have another massive protest and they'd escalate the war in Vietnam. But people didn't say, oh, I guess they're not listening to us, so I guess we'll just go home or crawl back into a hole. People got more angry. People came forward more powerfully. They brought forward more numbers. And that's what needs to happen now. And this is what I mean by creating, through massive and determined struggle of millions and millions of people, the kind of political situation, the kind of profound political crisis where it really becomes a situation where Trump cannot govern the country and cannot implement his fascist program.
You described in the 60s not saying, oh, they're not listening and then just giving up. But I think today, in a very widespread way, people have become convinced that the whole point of protest is to get them to listen, or maybe to be channeled then into the quote unquote realistic mode of electoral change. And I just wonder if you want to speak a little bit more to how what you're describing is very different than that.
It's important to understand, most people, when they start protesting under the existing system, they're not thinking that they're going to go all the way to trying to get rid of the system. They're are largely coming from the place of, we got to make our voices heard. We got to let the people in power know that we don't want this, and we've got to make them listen, and when we make them listen, then they'll change things. That was definitely true in the 60s. I remember the early demonstrations, whether you're talking about civil rights, or you're talking about anti-war, or whatever you're talking about. That was the mentality, and those were the sentiments of most of the people who took part at the beginning. The question is, what do you do when it becomes more and more clear that the people in power, yes, they heard you, but they don't give a damn, because they have interests that are fundamentally opposed to yours and fundamentally opposed to what you think is decent and moral, if you want to put it in that way. I mean, look at Biden. You know, what is Biden's legacy along with Harris going to be? Genocide and mass incarceration. That's the real legacy of Biden and the whole Biden-Harris administration. You know, and why did Biden continue, and why is he continuing right now in the very last days of his time in office? Why is he continuing to pump, military aid to Israel, as well as continuing to increase the U.S. aid to the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine? Because fundamental interests of the system are involved. The role of Israel as an outpost and as an attack dog for U.S. imperialism in this crucial strategic region of the Middle East is of fundamental consequence and importance for the whole U.S. capitalist imperialist system. And that's why, 99 physicians who were in Gaza wrote an open letter to Biden and Harris telling them in very, very clear terms the genocide that was being carried out and the massive scale, beyond even what the figures are, of the death and devastation this is causing. And they didn't care. It didn't impact them at all. Why? Because fundamental interests are involved in this system. So they're going to continue even in the face of all this. And, it may have even contributed to Harris losing the election that they pursued this, but there were more fundamental things at stake. Their service to this system was more important to them. They are more dedicated to this monstrosity of a system than they care even about their own political fortunes in the short term, much as they do care about that. Excuse me. So, when you see this, what do? Well, I guess the problem's just too big for us, so I guess we'll just go home, or we'll slink back and into the woodwork and talk about doing things locally or do self-care or whatever. I understand why people get discouraged, but the thing to do is not to get discouraged, it's to get more angry. And as a foundation for that anger, get a deeper understanding of what you're up against and what you're dealing with. To take the example again of the Vietnam War, it wasn't primarily the massive and growing demonstrations against the war in this country that forced the U.S. government to pull back from Vietnam. There was a whole complex of factors, including the whole international situation, and including how the protests in this country affected the military of this country, where, as they've admitted, in stages of the Vietnam War, especially the Army, was becoming unreliable. There were rebellions in the Army. So all that was very important. And even if it wasn't the most basic reason why they pulled back from Vietnam, it was a very important contributing factor. Because the very stability of rule of this system was beginning to be shaken in very fundamental ways as a result of their continuing the war in Vietnam and massive numbers of people coming to oppose it. And so the same kind of thing needs to happen now around this fascism represented, this MAGA fascism of Trump and this whole regime that's coming to power. And more fundamentally, and this has to do with the two slogans we talked about, more fundamentally, people need to look and see, why is it that this system doesn't listen to us? When clearly what we're saying is right, Clearly what we're saying is moral. Clearly what we're saying is righteous, but they don't listen. Why don't they listen to us? And what should we conclude from that? Should we conclude, well, I guess they're not going to listen, so we just have to go, back into the woodwork and go for ourselves? Or should we conclude there's something fundamentally wrong with this whole system? Some fundamental thing about its very nature which requires it to carry out, it's incredible atrocities like the genocide in Gaza that's fully armed and backed by the U.S. I mean, one of the signers of that letter, the 99 physicians and others that I referred to, made a simple statement. He said, how can it be the fact that there is no major political party in this country for whom genocide is a no-go? Think about that statement. What does that tell you? There's no major with all their very acute, even antagonistic differences, neither party considers genocide a no-go. Genocide is a go if it serves their fundamental interests, and they will back it to the hilt if that's the case. What should you do in the face of a recognition of that? Shrink back or come forward even more powerfully and even more fundamentally dig into the nature of the beast that you're up against and what's really necessary to deal with this beast in the way it needs to be dealt with?
That was an excerpt from Bob Avakian from a recent interview, and you can watch the full wide-ranging interview on this channel and on @BobAvakianOfficial on YouTube. And stay tuned for part 2 coming soon. This interview is remarkable. There's nothing else and there's no one else like Bob Avakian with his scientific clarity and vision, deep-going analysis, and real-time revolutionary leadership. This is what people all throughout society need to encounter. In these interviews, Bob Avakian is more real about the extreme danger that we're facing with existential stakes than almost anyone. But at the same time, he's more scientifically grounded in the positive possibility in the face of these horrors than anyone, with a conquering spirit exactly because he recognizes the stakes for the people of the world and because he knows that a whole better world is possible, which he brings alive all throughout these interviews. And he doesn't shy away from challenging you to be part of putting yourself on the line to fight for this. This is what millions of people need to hear, engage, debate, take up, and spread. But reaching those millions is going to require creativity, determination, and funding. The national campaign to get Bob Avakian's voice reaching everywhere just announced a new $30,000 goal to pay for the production of these interviews, along with targeted online advertising, and a much more expansive on-the-ground grassroots push to pay for posters, stickers, and flyers, reaching people up from the underground, including all those in the streets who are furious, but who need clarity and direction. Your donation will help Bob Avakian's voice have the reach that it needs to cut through the noise and the misdirection of the well-funded politicians and the media mouthpieces of this system. And in addition to this $30,000 that we aim to raise by March 31st, we also want to raise $25,000 to hire a national guerrilla marketing company to reach into big cities and small towns with creative in-your-face posters. You've seen those big posters advertising movies or upcoming concerts. Imagine this kind of attention-getting posters, but with a revolutionary message, reverberating with the online and on-the-ground reach, forcing people in a dire situation to sit up and take notice. But this won't happen without you. Whether you can give $5 or $500, become a monthly sustainer and be part of raising funds. Look, now is the time to reach very, very widely, because people have ears to hear this in new ways right now, because shit's so fucking extreme. The whole future's on the line, and a whole different future is possible. Donate and be part of raising funds so that this message reaches people everywhere with the urgency that the situation demands.
All right, so as promised, we're going to go back to the protest, to some of the really insightful, the diverse, the heartfelt voices, just some of those who were speaking out on Monday. These are largely taken from the refusefascism.org protest in Los Angeles. and a little bit more from New York.
Before we start, I want you to understand one thing and one thing only. The power that we have right now is not granted by a president. The power that we have right now is not granted by Congress. The power that we have as the people of the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, it comes from every single one of you. And right now, today, you have decided to use it and demonstrate for the right cause. Thank you.
Trump must go! Trump must go! Trump must go! Trump must go! So how do we do that? You might be wondering. Anybody wondering that? Okay. The millions and millions who hate everything that Trump and the MAGA fascists represent, everything that he's doing must be mobilized. They are the one force that can do this. Not just relying on the courts, because let's get real. He said he doesn't care what the courts say. He's going to do it anyway. He says if it saves the country, it doesn't violate any laws, right? And ultimately, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, is stacked with who? Fascists that Trump put there. So y'all, it's up to us. We gotta be mobilized to stand up, to resist in the streets and throughout society. We gotta have the federal workers who've been purged rising up. We've gotta have the teachers who are being muzzled from teaching the truth about the white supremacist roots and current reality of the United States. We gotta have them rising up. We've gotta have the healthcare workers who are being told that they gotta let women die instead of providing them with abortion care. They've gotta be rising up. We've gotta have the healthcare workers who are being told to deny gender-affirming, life-saving care to our youth to be rising up. We've gotta have the scientists who are being told they can't do their research rising up. We need all of society rising up together relentlessly again and again and again until these fascists are out.
When a leader tells their followers that they will make it so they never have to go to the polls and vote again, that is a giant red flag and an example of fascist leadership. It's been less than a month since Inauguration Day, and a lot of change and dismantling of the government has already taken place. The parallels of what is happening in the United States White House at this very moment with what happened in Nazi Germany in 1933 terrifies me, not only as a German American, but as a human being on planet Earth. Hitler completely dismantled the German government and seized totalitarian power in 53 days, creating a threat not only to Germany, but to the entire world. You might be feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by the daily flood of executive orders dismantling federal programs and laying off government employees. You might feel that so much change is happening so rapidly that it's impossible to keep up. That's intentional. The current administration wants you to feel overwhelmed, confused, and powerless. As the current administration works quickly and tirelessly to dismantle democracy as we know it, we must come together to resist fascism. Time is crucial, and the current administration must be removed from power immediately.
Todo el mundo está hablando de lo que es una deportación y se están apoyando solamente en las deportaciones, pero la realidad es otra.
They got everybody out here talking about deportations, that, deportation this, but the reality is that it's something else. It's not just deportations.
Es el gobierno que tenemos fascista.
All right, let's get this straight. Since 1876, the laws of Jim Crow have made a very clear attempt to separate race.
All right. Yeah.
Let's remember that the goal of a fascist government is to remove the civil rights, the most basic rights each one of you have, in order to remove any kind of authority that you may have upon this government. In order to stop this fascist government, we need not hundreds, not thousands, we need millions of people to take the streets. Yeah. The power that you got upon this government.
Creando así una crisis política donde Trump no pueda gobernar el país.
And with that, creating a political crisis in which Donald Trump and his little circus he got going on cannot govern this country.
Is it possible to live a whole different way, free of exploitation and oppression, free of having to live in a society where that it is divided between masters and slaves, oppressed and oppressors?
All right.
Our answer to that is yes, yes there is.
As a reverend, as a believing follower of Jesus Christ, who we call the Prince of Peace. How many of you know that we love a peaceful America? How many of you love a peaceful America? And more than that, he was one who represented love. How many of you love a loving America? Yeah. And we are out here because we love the America that we have experienced. Not that it has been perfect, but it has provided us the opportunity to do better, right? To be better and to be the best nation in the world. And we don't plan to allow a chump like Trump to end it. I'm here standing in the name of humanity. In other words, that each and every one of us are human beings. And I believe that all of us pursue to live a life that is humane. In other words, all right, you can give that a hand. And that we are people of compassion. Doesn't mean that we agree on everything. Doesn't mean that we like everything. But we've learned through time to live together for the good of us all. And that's why I'm standing here. Give that a hand. I want to thank Bob Avakian and the RevCom family, in which I have been fortunate enough to be able to come in partnership with them. How many of you know that each and every one of us, in order to succeed, we must all become partners? All right? Yeah, we must partner. And let me say this, I am very excited by what I see. All of you who are out here, and let me say this, the next time you show up, bring a friend. Amen? Yeah, bring a friend. And in order for us to be successful, it takes all of us. Takes all of us. And I want to say is that we are much better together. Yeah, we're much better together. And I want to give you a slogan to remember. United, we prosper. Divided, we perish. United, we prosper. Divided, we perish. And we will not allow Donald Trump, Elon Musk, or anyone divide us. We're going to stand together in unity.
I personally come to this as a follower of the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian. You've heard his name already. He is the architect of a new communism, and in addition, he is somebody who has, for over 10 years, been analyzing and sounding the alarm against Trump MAGA fascism, and for more than 30 years, sounding the alarm against the roots of this American fascism that's been rising. And I'm going to tell you very honestly today, sisters, brothers, beautiful people, that if more people had listened to what Bob Avakian has been saying about this, Instead of ignoring it because of all too much snark and anti-communism in this society, all too much ignorance and fear of stepping out of people's comfort zone, we would be in a different place right now. So in my speech today, I'm going to draw from Bob Avakian's insights on this, and I want to challenge you to engage his work directly at Bob Avakian Official on all social media platforms. This is the perspective I am bringing to this. So I want to talk first about what are we facing in Trump fascism. One, it is open white supremacy. Two, it is hatred of women and LGBT people. Three, it is disgusting America first contempt for foreigners, immigrants, and threats against the people of the world. And no decent person should accept any of this. But Trump fascism is more than even all of this. And this is very important to understand. You see, fascism is a change in the way the country is ruled. Fascism eliminates basic rights. Fascism shuts down the space for anybody to oppose it. This is why Trump is going after his enemies list and issuing threats against even very high-powered ruling class officials. This is why Trump pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists. This is why Trump is purging. That's right. This is why Trump is purging everybody in the federal government who does not go along with his fascist decrees. This is why Trump and Musk and MAGA are defying court rulings and stoking a constitutional crisis. This is why they are muzzling the media and teachers and scientists and healthcare officials and more. And here is what is extremely important to grasp. Life and death important to grasp. The lesson of history is that fascism must be defeated before it is able to consolidate. The lesson of Nazi Germany is that people must act before the terror is fully unleashed. Before every institution is transformed into an instrument of fascist enforcement. And before the millions of people who are not directly targeted and rounded up have allowed themselves to become silent and complicit. And there is one force in this country that is powerful enough to defeat Trump MAGA fascists. It is not Congress. It is not the courts. It is not the Democratic Party or that so-called mythical, sane, patriotic Republican. No, the force that is powerful enough to defeat this fascism is the millions and millions of regular people across this country. The people who hate everything Trump is doing and everything he stands for. What is needed to defeat Trump MAGA fascism is for these millions of people to be mobilized, to stand up and resist in the streets and in every institution throughout society, not once and giving up, but again and again refusing to stop growing in our numbers until we, through our political resistance, create the level of profound political crisis across this country that creates the conditions where Trump cannot govern, cannot impose his fascist program, and cannot even hang on to the reins of power. All right, so before we close out today's show, we want to alert you. You saw Noche Diaz, the national spokesperson for the RevCom Corps for the Emancipation of Humanity, earlier in today's episode. On February 1st, he was illegitimately arrested by Chicago police for exercising his First Amendment right, for speaking out against this Trump MAGA fascism, leading a really beautiful outpouring of immigrant youth and birthright youth, standing up for immigrants' rights and others standing up against Trump MAGA fascism, to take the pledge in the name of humanity. We refuse to accept a fascist America, and speaking more broadly. He was arrested along with Leo Pargo, who is also a member of the RevCom Corps in Chicago. It is really unacceptable that these charges have been brought against them. They are facing jail time and a serious fine, completely illegitimately. So we want you to go to change.org. There is a petition demanding the charges be dropped. You can read about their case there. You can find the video and the footage of their speaking out and their arrest. And also, if you are in the Chicago area, March 12th, show up for their hearing, demand the charges be dropped, not only for them, but to send a message that we're going to have the backs of people who stand up and speak out against this fascism and call for even more resistance. We're not going to let you shut this down.
That's right. We'll drop a link in the caption below to that petition, which you should sign yourself and take up and spread. We also, before we want to close out, we also want to celebrate the release of the political prisoner Leonard Peltier, who after 50 years in the cages of this system was let go, was finally free. So welcome home, Leonard Peltier, and let's learn from your spirit of determination and struggle.
All right. And with that, thanks to the Revolution Nothing Less crew for all your work putting the show together. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, leave a comment below. Stay tuned for part 2 of the new Bob Avakian interviews. It's an extraordinary part 2 to come. And with that, we'll see you back here next week.
Good night.